The human soldier stood alone against the cruel tyrant, a beacon of defiance in a galaxy crushed under the weight of oppression. Terry Wright, Earth's last hope, faced Emperor Fenris in the heart of the Romulan Empire's stronghold. The galaxy trembled under Fenris's iron-fisted rule. The Romulan Empire had conquered countless worlds, leaving a trail of subjugated species and shattered civilizations in its wake. Earth remained one of the few bastions of freedom, a stubborn holdout against the tide of Romulan domination. But time was running out. The Romulan armada loomed on the edge of Earth's solar system, poised to strike. Humanity's leaders, desperate to avoid annihilation, had sent Terry Wright on a last-ditch diplomatic mission. As a decorated soldier with extensive combat experience against Romulan forces, Terry was chosen for his tactical brilliance and unwavering courage. Earth's most advanced starship carried Terry and his delegation across the stars to the Romulan homeworld. The planet's surface bristled with weaponry, a clear display of the Empire's military might. As they descended, Terry steeled himself for the confrontation ahead. Romulan guards escorted them through the massive fortress that served as Fenris's seat of power. The corridors echoed with the click of Terry's boots and the heavy footfalls of their captors. Finally, they reached the throne room. The chamber stretched before them, a cavernous space filled with the spoils of conquest. Artifacts from 100 worlds lined the walls, silent testaments to fallen civilizations. At the far end, Emperor Fenris sat upon a throne of polished bones, his towering green form a stark contrast to the pale seat of power. Fenris's razor-sharp claws drummed against the armrest as his glowing red eyes fixed on the human delegation. Terry stepped forward, acutely aware of the tension crackling through the air. He began to speak, presenting Earth's case for peace, but Fenris cut him off with a dismissive wave. The Emperor's voice boomed through the chamber, demanding Earth's immediate and unconditional surrender. Terry refused, his words firm and unyielding. Fenris's eyes narrowed, and with a snarl he ordered his guards to execute the humans as an example to all who would defy the Romulan Empire. In that moment, Terry's training took over. His hand moved in a blur, drawing a concealed energy weapon. The first guard fell before the others could react. Terry ducked and weaved, his combat skills honed by years of warfare, allowing him to outmaneuver the Romulan soldiers. Chaos erupted in the throne room. The other delegates were quickly taken hostage, leaving Terry alone against a sea of enemies. As he fought, Terry's mind raced. He was trapped in the heart of the Romulan Empire, surrounded by hostile forces. The fate of Earth, of the entire galaxy, rested on his shoulders. Terry realized that the only way to save his homeworld and free the oppressed races across the galaxy was to overthrow Fenris himself. As he battled, he began to formulate a daring plan. He would need to infiltrate the fortress's security systems, gather allies among the subjugated alien populations, and ultimately face Fenris in a final confrontation. Word of Terry's defiance spread like wildfire through the fortress and beyond. Across the galaxy, oppressed beings looked up from their toil, hope rekindling in their hearts. For the first time in generations, they dared to imagine a future free from Romulan dominion. In the actions of one human soldier, they saw the potential for their own liberation. As alarms blared and reinforcements poured into the throne room, Terry Wright stood his ground. He was one man against an empire, but in his stand against tyranny, he had become a symbol of resistance. The battle for the galaxy's freedom had begun, and humanity would lead the charge. Terry Wright's mind raced as he surveyed the chaos erupting around him in the Romulan throne room. The fallen guards at his feet and the blaring alarms signaled that his daring act of defiance had irrevocably altered the course of events. He knew that staying in this chamber meant certain death, so he seized the moment of confusion to make his escape. With practiced efficiency, Terry disabled the energy weapon he had used and concealed it once more. He sprinted towards a side door, narrowly avoiding a barrage of disruptor fire from the remaining Romulan guards. The acrid smell of ozone filled his nostrils as energy bolts scorched the walls around him. Terry's combat-honed instincts guided him through the labyrinthine corridors of the fortress. The pounding of armored feet behind him, spurred him onward as he searched for a way to lose his pursuers. He rounded a corner and spotted a maintenance hatch set into the floor. Without hesitation, he wrenched it open and dropped into the darkness below. The fall was longer than expected, and Terry landed hard on a metal grating. Pain lanced through his body, but he forced himself to his feet and pressed onward. The dim emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as he navigated through a maze of pipes and conduits. As he moved deeper into the bowels of the fortress, the polished walls gave way to rough-hewn stone. The air grew thick with the acrid tang of industrial chemicals and the musty scent of unwashed bodies. Terry realized he had stumbled into the slave quarters and mining facilities that powered the Romulan war machine. Cautiously, he made his way through the caverns, staying alert for any signs of Romulan guards. Instead, he encountered the haunted eyes of dozens of enslaved aliens from various species. They cowered at his approach, clearly unused to seeing free humans in their midst. "I mean you no harm," Terry whispered, holding up his empty hands. "I'm here to help." A blue-skinned female with delicate antennae stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. "You're the one they're hunting," she said, her voice low and musical. "The human who defied Fenris." Terry nodded. "I'm Terry Wright. And you are?" "Zara," she replied. "Former resistance fighter from Andoria." She glanced around at the other slaves, then back to Terry. "If you truly want to help, we need to talk privately." Zara led Terry to a secluded alcove, out of earshot of the other workers. In hushed tones, she explained the layout of the fortress and the cruel system of quantium mining that fueled the Romulan Empire's dominance. "This mineral is the key to their power," Zara said, her antenna twitching with agitation. "Without it, their weapons and shields would be crippled." Terry's mind raced with the possibilities. "If we could disrupt the mining operations—" Zara nodded, a spark of hope igniting in her eyes. "It would be a severe blow to the Empire. But it won't be easy. The Romulans guard these facilities zealously." Over the next few days, Terry and Zara worked tirelessly to build a network of trusted allies among the slaves. They started small, orchestrating minor acts of sabotage in the mining facilities. A conveyor belt would mysteriously break down, or a shipment of quantium would go missing. Each small victory emboldened the enslaved workers. Terry shared stories of Earth's freedom and the possibility of a galaxy liberated from Romulan oppression. Slowly but surely, a spark of rebellion began to grow in the hearts of the downtrodden. As reports of the disturbances reached the upper levels of the fortress, Emperor Fenris's paranoia grew. He ordered increased security measures and harsher punishments for the slaves. But his cruelty only served to fan the flames of resentment. Terry knew that their window of opportunity was limited. The Romulans would eventually trace the source of the sabotage, and their retaliation would be swift and brutal. He needed to act decisively to turn the tide. "We need to get a message to Earth," Terry told Zara as they huddled in a dim corner of the mines. "If we can inform them of the Romulan vulnerabilities, they might be able to launch a coordinated attack." Zara's antenna drooped slightly. The communications center is one of the most heavily guarded areas in the fortress. It's impossible to reach. Terry's heart made. "Then we'll make it possible. We need a distraction, something big enough to draw away most of the guards." They spent hours planning, weighing risks and possibilities. Finally, they settled on a daring strategy. They would ignite a full-scale riot in the slave quarters. When the appointed time came, Terry gave the signal. Throughout the lower levels of the fortress, slaves rose up against their oppressors. The sound of shouts and breaking equipment echoed through the caverns as the riot quickly spread. Taking advantage of the chaos, Terry led a small team of trusted allies, including Zara, towards the communications center. They slipped through maintenance tunnels and rarely used corridors, avoiding the bulk of the Romulan forces rushing to quell the uprising. As they neared their objective, Terry's group encountered an unexpected obstacle. A squad of elite Romulan guards, led by a scarred veteran, Terry would later learn was Commander Vex, blocked their path. "Intruders!" Vex bellowed, raising his disruptor. "Eliminate them!" The corridor erupted in a storm of energy bolts. Terry dove for cover behind a jutting wall panel, returning fire with his concealed weapon. Zara and the others scattered, using their knowledge of the fortress layout to outmaneuver the Romulans. Terry's military training kicked in as he assessed the situation. The narrow corridor limited the Romulans' numerical advantage, but they were still outgunned. He needed to even the odds. With a series of hand signals, Terry coordinated his team's movements. They leapfrogged from cover to cover, providing suppressing fire for each other. Terry himself took down 3 Romulan guards with precise shots, his aim honed by years of combat. But the Romulans kept coming. For every guard they dropped, it seemed 2 more took their place. Terry's team found themselves pinned down, the communications center tantalizingly close yet unreachable. As disruptor fire scorched the air around them, Terry realized he faced an impossible choice. They could retreat, preserving their lives but losing this crucial opportunity to contact Earth. Or they could push forward, risking everything on this one chance to turn the tide of the war. The decision deeply affected on Terry as he looked at his battered team. Zara met his gaze, her antenna quivering with a mix of fear and willpower. In her eyes he saw the same fire that burned within him, the unquenchable desire for freedom. Before Terry could give the order, a new sound cut through the chaos of battle. Alarms, different from those triggered by the riot, began to blare throughout the fortress. The Romulan guards paused in their assault, clearly confused by this new development. Commander Vex's communicator chirped urgently. His eyes widened as he listened to the message. Then he barked orders to his men. The Romulan forces began to fall back, moving with a new urgency that had nothing to do with the firefight. Terry and his team exchanged puzzled glances. What could have drawn off their attackers so suddenly? As the echoes of disruptor fire faded, they could hear the distant sounds of even greater chaos erupting throughout the fortress. Something had changed, shifting the balance of power in ways Terry couldn't yet understand. But he knew one thing for certain. This was their chance. With the path now clear, they had to reach the communications center and contact Earth. The destiny of the universe hung in the balance, and Terry Wright was determined to seize this moment, whatever the cost. Cost! Terry's mind raced as he assessed the situation. The sudden retreat of the Romulan forces presented an unexpected opportunity, but he knew they couldn't afford to waste it. He turned to his team, his eyes scanning their weary but determined faces. "Zara, you're with me," he said, his voice low and urgent. "The rest of you, fall back and support the uprising. Keep the pressure on the Romulans and protect the other slaves." His team nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. As they moved to carry out his orders, Terry and Zara pressed forward towards the communications center. The corridors were eerily empty, the distant sounds of chaos echoing through the fortress. They had barely made it halfway when a figure stepped out from a side passage, causing them to raise their weapons instinctively. The newcomer held up his hands, revealing himself to be a Romulan in a scientist's uniform. "Wait!" the Romulan called out. "I'm Dr. Vex. I want to help you." Terry kept his weapon trained on the scientist. "Why should we trust you?" Dr. Vex's eyes darted nervously between Terry and Zara. "Because I've seen enough of Fenris's cruelty. This empire, it's not what I signed up for. I can get you into the communications center." Zara's antenna twitched as she studied the Romulan. "He's telling the truth, Terry, at least about wanting to help us." After a moment's hesitation, Terry lowered his weapon. "All right, Doctor, lead the way." With Dr. Vex's security clearance, they navigated through the fortress's security systems with relative ease. As they approached the communications center, the scientist provided them with crucial information about the facility's layout and security protocols. The center itself was a hub of advanced technology, banks of computers lining the walls, and a massive central console dominating the room. Terry wasted no time, his fingers flying over the controls as he established a secure connection with Earth. "This is Lieutenant Commander Terry Wright, authorization code Zulu Tango 937. He spoke into the comm unit. "I'm transmitting from within the Romulan fortress. We have a situation here." As Terry relayed the critical information about the Empire's weaknesses and the ongoing rebellion, Zara's eyes widened as she discovered a database on one of the secondary consoles. "Terry!" she called out, her voice tight with excitement. "I've found something. It's a list of all the Romulan-controlled worlds and their slave populations. This could help coordinate a galaxy-wide uprising." Terry nodded, his conversation with Earth Command still ongoing. "Did you get all that?" he asked into the comm. "We need immediate support, a covert strike team to exploit this chaos and hit key Romulan installations." The response from Earth was swift. "Understood, Commander Wright. Support is on the way. ETA 48 hours. Hold your position and continue to disrupt Romulan operations." As Terry ended the transmission, a new alarm blared through the fortress. Dr. Vex's face paled. "It's Fenris," he said, his voice shaking. "He knows we're here." The sound of heavy footsteps and shouted orders grew closer. Terry's mind raced, analyzing their options. His gaze fell on the central power core of the communications center, and a desperate plan formed. "We need to go now," he ordered, moving swiftly to the power core. With practiced efficiency, he began to rewire the system, his hands moving with precision despite the growing sounds of approach. "What are you doing?" Zara asked, her antenna twitching nervously. "Creating a distraction," Terry replied, his focus unwavering, "and our way out." As he finished the sabotage, the doors to the communications center burst open. Emperor Fenris himself stood at the threshold, flanked by his elite guard, his face contorted with rage. "Seize them!" Fenris roared, pointing at Terry and his companions. "Time to go," Terry said, grabbing Zara and Dr. Vex by the arms. He led them towards a maintenance hatch in the far wall, ducking under a barrage of disruptor fire. They had barely made it into the narrow maintenance tunnel when the communications center erupted in a massive explosion. The force of the blast propelled them forward, heat searing at their backs as they scrambled through the passage. Emerging into a lower level of the fortress, they found themselves in the midst of the ongoing slave rebellion. The explosion had thrown the Romulan forces into disarray, and the diverse alien species that made up the slave population were taking full advantage of the chaos. Terry quickly took charge, his military training kicking in as he organized the rebelling slaves into a more cohesive fighting force. He directed them to seize weapons from fallen Romulan guards and establish defensive positions at key junctions. As the rebellion gained momentum, Terry received word that uprisings were beginning on other Romulan-controlled worlds. The Empire's forces, stretched thin across multiple fronts, were struggling to maintain control. With the knowledge that Earth's strike team would arrive in 48 hours, Terry began to formulate a new plan. His eyes fell on a schematic of the fortress displayed on a captured Romulan datapad. "The main hangar," he mused, studying the layout. "If we could seize control of it—" Zara leaned in, her antenna perking up with interest. "The flagship of the Romulan fleet is docked there," she added. "Capturing it would be a significant blow to their morale and military capabilities." As Terry began to outline his plan to the gathered rebels, Dr. Vex approached, his face grave. "There's something else you need to know," the Romulan scientist said, his voice low. "Fenris has been developing a superweapon, one capable of destroying entire star systems. It's powered by refined quantium." Terry's expression hardened as he absorbed this new information. The stakes had just gotten even higher. They needed to neutralize this threat alongside their plan to capture the flagship. As the rebellion continued to gain ground within the fortress, Terry coordinated attacks on strategic points, gradually pushing the Romulan forces back. His leadership and tactical acumen proved invaluable, inspiring confidence in the diverse group of former slaves fighting for their freedom. Reports began to filter in of growing dissent within the Romulan ranks. Emperor Fenris's increasingly erratic and violent behavior, including the execution of suspected sympathizers, was causing some soldiers to question their loyalty. With less than 24 hours until the arrival of Earth's strike team, Terry gathered his key allies. They huddled around a makeshift planning table, the sounds of ongoing skirmishes echoing in the distance. "All right," Terry said, his voice firm and focused. "Here's what we're going to do. We have 3 primary objectives. Prepare for the strike team's arrival, seize control of the main hangar and the flagship, and neutralize this superweapon. We'll need to split our forces and coordinate our attacks precisely. As Terry began to outline the details of each mission, the gathered rebels leaned in, their faces a mix of grit and anticipation. The next 24 hours would determine not just the fate of their rebellion, but the future of the entire galaxy. Terry looked at each of his allies in turn, from Zara with her quivering antenna, to Dr. Vex, the Romulan scientist who had risked everything to help them. He knew the challenges that lay ahead were immense, but in this moment, surrounded by beings from across the galaxy united in their fight for freedom, he felt a surge of something powerful. Without another word, they set to work, each acutely aware of the monumental task before them and the limited time they had to accomplish it. Terry's mind raced as he finalized the details of their plan. The diverse group of rebels hung on his every word, their faces a mix of persistence and apprehension. He divided their forces into 3 teams: Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. Alpha team, you're with me, Terry announced. We'll target the main hangar and capture the Romulan flagship. Zara, you'll lead Beta team. Focus on securing and defending key strategic points within the fortress. Dr. Vex, you'll guide Gamma team to locate and neutralize that superweapon. As the rebels dispersed to their assigned groups, Terry pulled Zara aside. Be careful out there, he said, his voice low. Your knowledge of this place is crucial. Use it to your advantage. Zara nodded, her antenna twitching with nervous energy. You too, Terry. That hangar won't be easy to take. Terry's prediction proved accurate as Alpha Team encountered heavy resistance on their push towards the main hangar. Energy shields flickered to life, creating impenetrable barriers, while automated defense turrets unleashed a barrage of disruptor fire. Kalen Voss, take out those shield generators, Terry shouted over the din of battle. He ducked behind a fallen support beam, plasma bolts sizzling past his head. Terry's military training kicked in as he assessed the situation. The Romulans had the advantage of superior positioning and firepower, but their formation had weaknesses. He spotted a gap in their defenses, a blind spot created by the placement of their energy shields. Alpha 3 and 4, provide covering fire, Terry ordered. The rest of you, follow me. He led a small group through a series of maintenance tunnels, emerging behind the Romulan lines. The sudden assault from an unexpected direction threw the defenders into disarray. Terry's team exploited this confusion, taking down the shield generators and creating an opening for the rest of Alpha Team to pour through. The battle for the hangar was brutal. Rebels fell to Romulan fire, their cries of pain mixing with the harsh bark of disruptor rifles. But for every rebel that fell, 2 more took their place, driven by the promise of freedom. As Terry's forces breached the outer perimeter of the hangar, he received an urgent communication from Dr. Vex. The scientist's voice crackled with static and barely held back panic. Commander Wright, we've located the superweapon, Vex reported, but it's already in its final stages. Fenris is ordering its immediate activation. Terry's blood ran cold. He looked at the Romulan flagship, so tantalizingly close, then back at his battered but determined team. The choice was clear, but it didn't make it any easier. Listen up, Terry called out. Change of plans. I'm taking a small squad to reinforce Gamma Team. The rest of you continue the operation to seize the flagship. Lieutenant Kira, you're in command. Kira, a battle-hardened Andorian, nodded grimly. We'll have that ship ready for you when you return, sir. Terry selected his squad, and they set off at a sprint towards the secret laboratory. The fortress had become a war zone, with pockets of intense fighting erupting in corridors and plazas. They encountered unexpected resistance as they neared their objective. Fenris must have concentrated his most loyal troops here, Terry muttered, as they took cover from a hail of disruptor fire. The close-quarters combat was intense. Terry's squad fought room by room, slowly pushing towards the lab. The air was thick with the acrid smell of ozone from energy weapons and the metallic tang of blood. Meanwhile, Zara led Beta Team on a series of lightning strikes against Romulan command posts and communication hubs. Her intimate knowledge of the fortress's layout proved invaluable as she guided her team through hidden passages and maintenance tunnels. "Plant the charges here," Zara instructed, indicating a crucial power relay. "This should knock out communications for the entire eastern sector." The coordinated attacks threw the Romulan command structure into chaos. Officers found themselves unable to coordinate their forces effectively, while conflicting orders led to confusion among the rank and file. In orbit around the Romulan homeworld, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. News of the rebellion had spread to the fleet, causing a schism among the ship's crews. Some vessels remained loyal to Fenris, while others declared their support for the rebels. The space above the planet became a chaotic battleground as Romulan ships fired on one another. Shields flared and hulls buckled as the once mighty armada tore itself apart. It was into this maelstrom that Colonel Sarah Robertson's Earthstrike team arrived. Robertson's eyes widened as she took in the scene before her. "Dispatch fighters to engage any ships targeting rebel-aligned vessels," she ordered. "Cruisers, form up and prepare for atmospheric entry. We need to get ground support to Wright and his team." As Robertson's forces entered the fray, Terry's squad finally reached the laboratory. They found Dr. Vex and Gamma team engaged in a tense standoff with the Romulan security detail guarding the superweapon. "About time you got here," Vex called out, his voice strained. "We can't let them activate that weapon." Terry assessed the situation quickly. The Romulan guards were entrenched behind energy shields, with a clear line of fire to the lab entrance. The superweapon itself loomed behind them, a massive construct of gleaming metal and pulsing energy conduits. As Terry formulated a plan of attack, alarms began to blare throughout the lab. The weapon's activation sequence had begun. In his command center, Emperor Fenris watched as his carefully laid plans crumbled around him. His face contorted with rage as he barked orders into his communicator. "Initiate planet-wide lockdown of all facilities," he snarled. "Execute any suspected rebel sympathizers immediately. I don't care about their rank or position. Fail me, and you'll join them." Terry felt the vibrations as massive blast doors slammed shut throughout the fortress. The already daunting task before them had just become even more challenging. As the alarms continued to wail, Terry knew that the next few moments would decide not just the fate of their rebellion, but the future of the entire galaxy. He looked at his team, then at the Romulan guards protecting the superweapon, and steeled himself for the fight ahead. "We've got one shot at this," Terry said, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. "Let's make it count." "Count!" Terry's voice cut through the chaos as he led his team forward. The alarms continued to blare, their shrill wail a constant reminder of the urgency of their mission. As they approached the laboratory housing the superweapon, Terry's heart sank. An advanced energy shield shimmered before them, an impenetrable barrier between them and their objective. "Vex!" Terry called out. "We need that shield down now!" The Romulan scientist rushed forward, his fingers flying over a nearby control panel. "It's not that simple," Vex muttered. "This shield requires a complex deactivation sequence. It'll take time." "Time we don't have," Terry growled. He turned to his team. "Defensive positions! We need to buy Vex the time he needs." No sooner had the words left his mouth than a wave of Romulan soldiers rounded the corner, disruptor rifles blazing. Terry's team returned fire, the air filling with the sizzle of energy weapons and the acrid smell of ozone. As the battle raged, Terry's communicator crackled to life. "Commander Wright, this is Lieutenant Kira. We've secured the Romulan flagship in the main hangar." Despite the dire situation, Terry allowed himself a small smile. "Excellent work, Lieutenant. What's the status of the ship?" "Sir, you won't believe this." Kira's voice was filled with awe. "The technology on this ship is far beyond anything we've encountered. They call it the Subjugator. We've discovered a long-range communication system that could be a game-changer." Terry's mind raced with the possibilities. "Use it, Lieutenant. Contact Colonel Robertson's strike team. Coordinate an orbital assault on the Romulan defenses." As Kira acknowledged the order, Terry refocused on the battle at hand. The Romulan forces were pressing hard, their superior numbers threatening to overwhelm the rebel position. "Vex!" Terry shouted over the din of battle. "How much longer?" "Almost there," the scientist called back, his hands a blur over the control panel. "Just a few more seconds." Suddenly, the energy shield flickered and died. "It's down!" Vex yelled triumphantly. Terry didn't waste a moment. "Move in," he ordered, leading the charge into the laboratory. The interior of the lab was a maze of advanced equipment and pulsing energy conduits. At its center stood the superweapon, a massive construct that radiated power and menace. As Terry's team engaged the Romulan guards in close-quarters combat, his communicator crackled again. This time, it was Zara's voice that came through, tense and urgent. "Terry, we have a situation," she said. "A Romulan officer named Commander Drax has defected to our side. He's revealed that Emperor Fenris is planning to evacuate high-ranking officials to a secret bunker and activate the superweapon from there. They're going to sacrifice the planet's surface to maintain control of the Empire." Terry's blood ran cold at the implications. "Where are you now?" he asked. "We're heading to infiltrate the bunker," Zara replied. "Drax is leading us through hidden passages, but we're encountering heavy resistance." Terry made a split-second decision. "Continue your mission, Zara. Stop Fenris at all costs. We'll handle the superweapon here." As the communication cut off, Terry turned his attention back to the battle at hand. His team had secured the lab, but the real challenge lay before them. "Vex, how do we shut this thing down?" Terry asked, gesturing at the pulsing superweapon. The scientist's face was grim as he studied the weapon's control systems. "It's not good, Commander. The power core has become unstable due to the rushed activation. We can't simply shut it down without risking a catastrophic explosion." "What are our options?" Terry pressed. "We need to bleed off the energy gradually," Vex explained, "but it will take time. Time we may not have." As if to emphasize Vex's point, the entire structure shook violently. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. "What was that?" one of Terry's team members asked, fear evident in his voice. Terry's communicator came to life once more. "Commander Wright, this is Colonel Robertson. We've begun our orbital assault on Romulan defensive positions. Be advised, the fortress structure may be compromised due to the bombardment." Terry acknowledged the message, his mind racing. They were running out of time on multiple fronts. "Vex, start the energy bleeding process," Terry ordered. "The rest of you, secure our position. We need to buy as much time as possible." As Vex worked on the superweapon, Terry received another urgent communication from Zara. Her voice was strained, the sound of weapons fire clearly audible in the background. "Terry, we've reached the outer chambers of the bunker, but we're pinned down," she reported. "Fenris is preparing to escape. If he gets away, all of this might be for nothing." Terry closed his eyes, the weight of command bearing down on him like never before. He looked at the superweapon, its energy core still dangerously unstable. Then he thought of Fenris, the cruel emperor on the verge of escaping justice. The choice before him was impossible. Stay and ensure the safe deactivation of the superweapon, potentially saving millions of lives on the planet's surface, or abandon the process to reinforce Zara's team and prevent Fenris's escape, risking a catastrophic explosion, but potentially ending the war in one decisive stroke. Time seemed to slow as Terry weighed his options. The lives of millions hung in the balance, as did the fate of the entire rebellion. Whatever he decided, the consequences would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Terry took a deep breath, steeling himself for the decision that would shape the future of not just the Romulan Empire, but countless worlds across the stars. He opened his eyes, commitment etched into every line of his face, and gave his order. Terry's eyes darted between his team members, each face etched with tension and expectation. The weight of his decision pressed down on him, but he knew there was no time for hesitation. "Listen up," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We're splitting up. Half of you will reinforce Zara's team at the bunker. The rest stay here with me and Dr. Vex to stabilize this weapon." As his team quickly divided, Terry turned to Dr. Vex. What's our next move? Vex's fingers flew over the control panel, his brow furrowed in concentration. We need to bleed off the energy, but simply dissipating it could be catastrophic. However, if we redirect it into the fortress's power grid, we could overload their systems, Terry finished, catching on quickly. Do it! As Vex worked, the fortress shuddered violently. Chunks of ceiling crashed down around them, forcing Terry to dodge debris while keeping watch for any counterattack. In the secret bunker, Zara and her team pressed forward, emboldened by the arrival of Terry's reinforcements. Commander Drax, the defected Romulan officer, led them through a maze of corridors. The inner chambers are just ahead, Drax shouted over the din of battle. Fenris will be there, along with his most loyal guards. Zara nodded, her eyebrows furrowed. Form up! We breach on my mark! The combined rebel force surged forward, energy weapons blazing. They encountered fierce resistance from Fenris's elite guard, armed with advanced weaponry that cut through their ranks with deadly precision. In orbit, Colonel Sarah Robertson's voice crackled over the comms, tension evident in her tone. Right. Be advised. We've encountered heavy resistance from a hidden Romulan fleet. We'll continue to provide support, but our resources are stretched thin. Terry acknowledged the message grimly. The situation was spiraling out of control on all fronts. Back in the weapon lab, Vex called out triumphantly. It's working! The power transfer has begun! Terry watched as the pulsing energy of the superweapon began to flow into the fortress's systems. Throughout the complex, Romulan defenses started to fail, shields flickering and weapons powering down. Just as Terry allowed himself a moment of relief, his communicator crackled to life. Commander, this is Lieutenant Kira in the main hangar. We're under heavy assault. A group of loyalist officers is attempting to recapture the subjugator. We need immediate assistance. Terry's mind raced. Losing control of the flagship would be a devastating blow to their efforts. He quickly radioed a nearby rebel squad, ordering them to reinforce the hangar defenses. As the power transfer continued, Vex's expression suddenly changed from triumph to alarm. Commander, we have a problem. The fortress's grid can't handle the full output of the weapon. If we don't find a way to safely disperse the excess energy, we risk a chain reaction that could destroy the entire complex. Terry's heart sank. They'd solved one problem only to create another, potentially more devastating one. He looked around the lab, searching for inspiration, when his eyes fell on the long-range communication array. The array, he said, an idea forming. Can we use the excess energy to boost its signal? Vex's eyes widened as he caught on. Yes, but what do you have in mind? We're going to send a message, Terry said, his voice filled with persistence. To every Romulan-controlled world, it's time they learn the truth about their Emperor. As Terry and Vex worked to reconfigure the energy flow, the battle in the secret bunker reached its climax. Zara and her team, with Commander Drax's tactical guidance, had finally breached the inner chambers. Emperor Fenris stood at the far end of the room, surrounded by his remaining guards. His face contorted with rage as he saw the rebels pour in. You dare challenge me? He roared. I am the Empire. I am eternal. Zara raised her weapon, aiming squarely at the tyrant's chest. It's over, Fenris. Surrender now, and we'll ensure you receive a fair trial. Just then, Terry's voice boomed through the fortress's communication system, broadcast across the entire Romulan Empire. People of the Romulan worlds, hear me? His voice rang out, clear and unwavering. I am Commander Terry Wright of the Earth Alliance. For too long, you have suffered under the tyrannical rule of Emperor Fenris. Today, we reveal the truth. Your emperor was willing to sacrifice millions of his own people to maintain his grip on power. He does not serve the Empire. He serves only himself. As Terry's words echoed across countless worlds, their effect was immediate and profound. Reports flooded in of uprisings on Romulan-controlled planets, citizens and oppressed populations rising up against their rulers. In the bunker, Fenris's face drained of color as he realized his empire was crumbling around him. With a snarl of defiance, he slammed his hand down on a hidden panel in his throne. Alarms blared throughout the complex as a computerized voice announced, "Self-destruct sequence initiated. All personnel evacuate immediately." Zara's eyes widened in horror. "Drax, can you stop it?" The defected commander rushed to a nearby console. "I can try, but we don't have much time." As chaos erupted in the bunker, Terry received the alert about the self-destruct sequence. He turned to Vex, his expression grim. "We need to shut this weapon down now and get to that bunker," he said. "If Fenris destroys this fortress, everything we fought for will be lost." Vex nodded, his fingers already flying over the controls. "I'll start the shutdown sequence, but it will take time. You go. Stop Fenris." Terry hesitated for a moment, torn between his duty to his team and the need to end this once and for all. Finally, he nodded. "Keep working on the weapon," he ordered the remaining team members. "I'm going after Fenris." As Terry sprinted out of the lab, the fortress continued to crumble around him. The orbital bombardment, combined with the cascading failures caused by the energy transfer, had left the once impregnable structure on the verge of collapse. He raced through corridors littered with debris, dodging falling beams and sparking power conduits. The voices of his scattered teams came through his communicator, reporting on multiple crises unfolding simultaneously. In the bunker, Zara and her team fought to subdue Fenris's remaining guards, while Commander Drax worked frantically to disable the self-destruct mechanism. The Emperor himself had disappeared in the chaos, using hidden passages to make his escape. Terry pushed himself harder, knowing that every second counted. The fate of the rebellion and perhaps the entire galaxy hung in the balance. As he approached the bunker, he steeled himself for the final confrontation with Emperor Fenris. The fortress shuddered again, more violently than before. Terry stumbled, catching himself against a wall. He looked up to see a massive crack forming in the ceiling above him, ready to collapse at any moment. With gritted teeth, he pushed off the wall and continued his sprint towards the bunker, determined to end this fight once and for all. Terry burst through the doors of the secret bunker, his breath ragged from the sprint. The scene before him was chaos incarnate. Zara's team engaged in fierce combat with Fenris's guards, energy weapons scorching the walls and filling the air with acrid smoke. "Zara!" Terry shouted over the din. "Status report!" Zara ducked behind a fallen pillar, narrowly avoiding a barrage of enemy fire. "Fenris slipped away. We're pinned down, and the self-destruct is still active." Terry's mind raced, processing the converging threats. He tapped his communicator, establishing a multi-channel link. "All teams, listen up. We're initiating Operation Endgame." He turned to Zara. "Split your team. Half pursue Fenris, half work on disabling that self-destruct. Commander Drax, you're with the second group. Your Romulan expertise is our best shot at cracking their systems." Drax nodded grimly, already moving towards a nearby control panel. "I'll do my best, Commander." Terry's communicator crackled to life. "Right, this is Robertson. We've got a situation up here." "Go ahead, Colonel," Terry replied, ducking as a stray energy bolt whizzed overhead. "The hidden Romulan fleet has us outgunned. We need a game-changer. Fast." Terry's eyes narrowed. "The subjugator. Use its wormhole drive. Create a temporary spatial rift and outflank them." "Bold move, right?" Robertson responded, a hint of admiration in her voice. "Executing now." As the space battle raged above, Terry received another urgent transmission. "Commander, Lieutenant Kira here. We're barely holding the hangar. The Romulans are throwing everything they've got at us." "Hold your ground, Kira," Terry ordered. "Use the subjugator's defense systems. Help is on the way." He quickly redirected a nearby squad to reinforce the hangar defense. The fortress shuddered again, reminding Terry of the precarious nature of their position. "Dr. Vex," he called out, "how's our progress on the superweapon?" The scientist's voice came through, strained but determined. "We've made a breakthrough, Commander. We can redirect the excess energy to power a planetary shield. It's risky, but it could protect the surface from any potential fallout." Do it, Terry commanded, but be ready to abort if things go south. As Terry coordinated the multi-pronged assault, his earlier broadcast continued to ripple across the Romulan Empire. His communicator buzzed with incoming reports of uprisings on distant worlds, slave rebellions, and even defections among Romulan military units. Amidst the chaos, an unexpected message came through. This is Senator Valerius of the Romulan Senate. We wish to negotiate a peaceful transition of power. Terry's eyebrows shot up in surprise. This could change everything. Senator, I'm listening, but make it quick. We're on a tight schedule here. We offer our cooperation in exchange for amnesty and a voice in the new galactic order, Valerius proposed, his tone urgent. Terry weighed the offer, his mind racing through potential scenarios. Before he could respond, Zara's voice cut through the channel. Terry, we've cornered Fenris, but he's activated some kind of failsafe. He's threatening to release biological weapons. The weight of command pressed down on Terry like never before. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the decisions ahead. Senator Valerius, stand by. We'll discuss terms soon. Terry switched channels. Zara, hold your position. Do not let Fenris release those weapons at any cost. He turned to Dr. Vex. Doctor, I need options. Can we repurpose the superweapon to neutralize a biological threat? Vex's response was hesitant. Possibly, but it would require reconfiguring the quantium core. I'd need your direct assistance, and it would take you away from coordinating the overall assault. Terry closed his eyes for a moment, the fortress trembling around him. When he opened them, persistence burned in his gaze. Patch me through to all channels, he ordered. As the communication link established, Terry's voice rang out across the battlefield, from the depths of the crumbling fortress to the ships engaged in orbital combat. Listen up, everyone. We're at a critical juncture. The next few minutes will determine not just the fate of this battle, but the future of the galaxy. Each of you knows your role. Trust in your training, in each other, and in our cause. We didn't come this far to falter now. He paused, his words hanging in the air for a moment before continuing. Colonel Robertson, execute the wormhole maneuver. Lieutenant Kira, hold that hangar at all costs. Zara, keep Fenris contained, but do not, I repeat, do not let him release those bioweapons. Commander Drax, you have full authority to do whatever it takes to shut down that self-destruct sequence. Terry took a deep breath. I'm heading to assist Dr. Vex with the superweapon. We're going to turn this instrument of destruction into a tool for rebuilding. May fortune favor the bold. Right out. As Terry sprinted towards the superweapon lab, the fortress shook violently. Chunks of ceiling crashed down around him, forcing him to dodge and weave. The air was thick with dust and the acrid smell of burning electronics. He burst into the lab, finding Dr. Vex hunched over a complex array of controls. Talk to me, Doctor. What do you need? Vex looked up, his face streaked with sweat and grime. We need to reroute the main power conduits through the auxiliary systems. It's going to overload them, but if we time it right, we can channel the energy into a focused beam. Terry nodded, moving to a nearby console. A beam that can neutralize Fenris's bioweapons? If we can get a lock on their location, yes, Vex confirmed. But the targeting system is fried. We'll need to input the coordinates manually. As they worked feverishly to reconfigure the superweapon, reports flooded in from all fronts. Colonel Robertson's daring wormhole maneuver had caught the Romulan fleet off guard, turning the tide of the space battle. In the main hangar, Lieutenant Kira and her team were holding their ground, using the subjugator's advanced defenses to repel wave after wave of Romulan attacks. Zara's voice crackled through Terry's communicator. We've got Fenris cornered, but he's threatening to release the bioweapons any second. Whatever you're planning, Terry, do it fast. Terry's fingers flew over the controls, sweat beading on his forehead. Almost there, Zara. Keep him talking. We just need a few more seconds. As the superweapon hummed to life, its energy core pulsing with newfound purpose, Terry received one last transmission. It was Senator Valerius again. Commander Wright, we've convened an emergency session of the Romulan Senate. We're prepared to offer an immediate ceasefire and open negotiations for a new galactic accord. But we need assurances of our safety and sovereignty. Terry's mind raced, weighing the potential for a diplomatic solution against the immediate threat of Fenris's bioweapons. The future of the galaxy hung in the balance, with every decision carrying monumental consequences. As he prepared to make his final move, Terry realized that the true test of leadership wasn't just in winning battles, but in shaping the peace that followed. With the reconfigured superweapon at his fingertips and the fate of countless worlds in his hands, Terry Wright stood ready to face the ultimate challenge of his career. Terry's fingers hovered over the controls, his mind racing through the myriad of possibilities before him. The weight of countless lives pressed down on his shoulders, but he knew what had to be done. "Colonel Robertson," he called into his communicator, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Cease orbital bombardment immediately. I repeat, cease fire. Focus all efforts on containing any potential biological weapon release." "Understood, Commander," Robertson's voice crackled back, a mix of surprise and grit in her tone. "Redirecting our forces now." Without wasting another second, Terry sprinted from the room, his boots pounding against the metal flooring. The fortress continued to shudder and groan, debris raining down from the ceiling as he navigated the winding corridors. As he ran, Terry's mind raced through the complex series of events that had led him to this moment. What had started as a simple diplomatic mission had escalated into a full-scale revolution, with the fate of the stars hanging in the balance. Now everything hinged on his ability to reach the superweapon chamber and oversee its shutdown personally. Meanwhile, in another part of the crumbling fortress, Zara and her team had finally cornered Emperor Fenris in his inner sanctum. The room was a testament to Romulan opulence, with ornate tapestries and gleaming metal surfaces, now marred by the scars of battle. "Surrender, Fenris!" Zara shouted, her weapon trained on the cowering Emperor. "It's over!" Fenris snarled, his eyes darting wildly as he used his remaining loyal guards as human shields. "It's never over," he spat, his fingers inching towards a console on his throne. "I'll see this entire planet burn before I submit to you rebels." Commander Drax, his intimate knowledge of Romulan tactics coming into play, signaled silently to the rest of the team. In a coordinated move, they outflanked Fenris's position, cutting off his escape routes. Fenris's hand shot out towards the console, his intentions clear. But Zara, having anticipated this desperate move, fired a precise shot. The energy bolt struck the console, sending sparks flying and rendering it useless. "No!" Fenris howled, his last gambit foiled. In the superweapon chamber, Terry burst through the doors, his chest heaving from the exertion. Dr. Vex looked up from the complex array of controls, relief washing over his features. "Commander, you're just in time," Vex said, his fingers flying over the keypad. "I've initiated the shutdown sequence, but I need your help to redirect the Quantium Core's power." Terry nodded, moving swiftly to an adjacent control panel. "Tell me what you need, Doctor." As they worked in tandem, their movements a synchronized dance of technical precision, the fortress around them began to stabilize. The violent shuddering subsided, and the ominous creaking of stressed metal faded. "It's working!" Vex breathed, his eyes fixed on the readouts. "The structural integrity is holding. We might just pull this off." Back in the inner sanctum, Zara and Commander Drax closed in on the cornered Emperor. Fenris's eyes darted around the room, searching for any means of escape. His hand moved to his belt, reaching for what appeared to be an innocuous ornament. Drax's eyes widened in recognition. "It's a trap!" he shouted. "He's got a hidden explosive!" But even as the words left his mouth, Fenris's face contorted in confusion. He pressed the device repeatedly, growing more frantic with each attempt. "Looking for this?" Drax asked, holding up a small circuit board. "I took the liberty of disabling your little failsafe earlier. Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate such a move from you, Fenris?" The Emperor's shoulders slumped in defeat. With a nod from Zara, two members of her team moved in, securing Fenris's hands behind his back. As news of Fenris's capture spread through the fortress and beyond, the remaining loyal Romulan forces began to lay down their arms. The fight had gone out of them with the fall of their emperor. In orbit, Colonel Robertson watched in amazement as enemy ships powered down their weapons, some even broadcasting surrender messages. Her communicator chirped to life with a transmission from the planet's surface. "This is Senator Valerius of the Romulan Senate," a steady voice announced. "To all forces, both Romulan and Rebel, we call for an immediate cessation of hostilities. The time has come for peace and reconciliation." Terry and Dr. Vex, having successfully repurposed the superweapon's quantium core, shared a look of triumph. "Ready to broadcast the energy pulse, Commander," Vex reported. Terry took a deep breath, his hand hovering over the activation switch. "Let's end this," he said, and pressed the button. A wave of brilliant blue energy erupted from the fortress, sweeping across the planet and into space. As it passed, Romulan weapons and defense systems flickered and died. The pulse continued outward, harmless to living beings, but rendering countless instruments of war inert. In a hidden facility deep beneath the fortress, canisters of biological agents destabilized and neutralized, their deadly contents rendered harmless by the energy wave. With the immediate threats neutralized, Terry opened a channel to Colonel Robertson. "Colonel, I need you to establish a defensive perimeter around the planet. Use the subjugator's advanced systems to create a temporary planetary defense grid. We can't risk any outside interference while we begin peace talks." "Understood, Commander," Robertson replied. "We'll have the grid up and running within the hour." As the dust began to settle, Terry made his way to the fortress's main hangar, where the subjugator waited. He had called for a meeting, one that would shape the future of the galaxy. Representatives from Earth arrived first, followed by leaders of the recently liberated slave species. Finally, escorted by a contingent of both human and Romulan guards, Senator Valerius and other moderate Romulan officials entered the ship. Terry stood at the head of a large circular table, his posture straight but his expression open. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying across the room, "today we have the opportunity to forge a new path for our galaxy, one of cooperation, equality, and mutual respect. Let's begin." As the discussions commenced, Terry couldn't help but marvel at the sight before him. Former enemies now sat side by side, tentatively at first, but with growing openness as the hours passed. The foundations of a new galactic alliance were being laid, brick by careful brick. Outside the conference room, Zara approached Terry during a brief recess. "The prisoner transfer is complete," she reported. "Emperor Fenris is secure and ready for trial." Terry nodded, his expression grim but determined. "Good. His trial will serve as a clear message. The days of unchecked tyranny are over." As he turned to re-enter the conference room, Terry caught a glimpse of the stars through a nearby viewport. The galaxy seemed somehow brighter, full of promise and potential. He knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope for the future. With renewed purpose, Terry stepped back into the room, ready to continue the vital work of building a new era of peace and cooperation for all species of the galaxy.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.